Oh, hello. It's no great secret that I'm part Irish, and therefore every day must consume some quantity of potato lest I never again be able to walk in the sun. I can barely stand it for 5 minutes as it is. This is due to an ancient curse placed on the Irish by a vampire who was sick and tired of being taunted by an Irishman over his inability to walk in the sun. Little did this poor Irishman know, the vampire had just reached level 50 and had acquired the curses and hexes skill. He placed upon the Irish people a burden not unlike his own, that we would hunger for potatoes just as he thirsted for blood, and would harbor a lifelong aversion to sunlight. Day-to-day living is tough enough as it is. I've found myself sneaking potatoes into everything from candy to pancakes. But there's one little known aspect of the curse that makes it even tougher. On every 17th of March, every person of Irish descent must consume not only potatoes, but also cabbage and soda bread. This presents a problem to the vegan vampirishmen. Soda bread is traditionally made with buttermilk. I don't know if you know this, but buttermilk comes from cows, right out of their teats. It starts off like regular milk, but then they take it and put stuff in it to make it thick and sour. Clearly, milk and buttermilk are both out of the question. Fortunately, there is a solution, and tonight, we're making vegan soda bread. You'll need flour. You can use white, whole wheat, or even rye flour. You'll get the best results if at least half the flour you use is white, either all-purpose or bread flour. Then the other half can be whole wheat or rye. This will give the bread a good texture. You will need, of course, baking soda, from which the bread gets its name. This is what reacts with the acid in the buttermilk or buttermilk substitute to leaven the bread. It's best to use fresh baking soda for baking. Salt is optional, and the baking soda itself will lend the bread a bit of a salty flavor, but it also adds a bit of natural bitterness, and a dash of salt helps to take the edge off. You will need a vegan milk analog, such as rice milk, almond milk, or soy milk, or whatever you prefer, preferably unflavored and unsweetened. For this batch, I'm using homemade soy milk. You will also need some sort of food-safe acid, such as lemon juice or vinegar. Apple cider vinegar is probably the ideal thing to use for this, as it does the trick and it's not overbearing. It won't turn your soda bread into a sourdough. Preheat the oven to 375 degrees. First, you need to measure out 1 or 2 tablespoons of the lemon juice or vinegar. Then, add enough vegan milk analog to total 1 1/4 cups of liquid. Depending on what you use, it may or may not curdle as milk would. Either way, it will work just the same. Measure out 1 1/2 cups of white all-purpose flour and 1 cup of whole wheat flour. Add 1 teaspoon of baking soda and about half a teaspoon of salt. Then mix the dry ingredients until they are well incorporated. Add the soured vegan milk to the dry ingredients all at once, then stir well to incorporate it. It's difficult to give exact measurements for the flour and liquid in bread, as so many things can affect the ratio, such as temperature and humidity, so if you find that your dough is too dry, add a little bit more of the vegan milk. If you find it's too moist to work with, add a little bit more flour. I ended up adding a little bit more soy milk, maybe up to 1/4 cup extra. Mix the dough just until all of the dry ingredients are moistened, then turn it out onto a clean, floured surface. Sprinkle some flour on top of the dough as well, then begin kneading. I'm kneading a little sloppily here, but you really only need to knead it so that it's uniform and has a little spring. It should take about a minute or so. If the dough sticks too much, add a little bit more flour, but be careful not to add too much. The dough should remain fairly moist. Once you're done, form it into a ball or pat it out into a disc. I prefer to use a sheet of parchment paper on a baking sheet, but you can also use a greased baking dish. Place the dough in or on your dish and slash the top in a cross or V pattern. Place the loaf in the oven and bake for 30 to 35 minutes or until it is brown and you hear a hollow sound when you tap on the bottom of the loaf. Use extreme caution if you use this method to check the bread, as it will be very hot. Once it is done, cool the bread to a safe temperature on a wire rack. Soda bread is best eaten the day it is made, but if you wrap it up or put it in a plastic bag once it has cooled, it will keep very well for at least a few days. You can tear pieces off with your hands, or you can slice the bread with a sharp knife. One of my favorite ways to eat soda bread is sliced and spread with vegan margarine or jam. It can also serve as an excellent complement to soup or other hearty dishes.
Well, that was absolutely delicious, and I can still walk in the sun for 5 minutes at a time, although I am still pastier than the average vampire. Tune in next time for information on something else.